It's such a pleasure being here tonight because we did raise our kids at Sharing Shabbat, and I see Warren and some other folks who we got to enjoy sharing Shabbat with. I mean, the last time I gave a drash, my now 22-year-old twins and 19-year-old college junior were little kids running around this place. So just being here brings back a lot of memories. Shabbat Shalom. I want to first thank the WRT clergy for helping me prepare for my bar mitzvah portion. Wait, I think that's the wrong speech. Here we go. My drash for Parshat Teitzei. Parshat Teitzei contains over 70 mitzvot, the most of any parsha in the Torah, and some of them are real doozies. Like, did you know that if you bring a captive woman home who you desire to be your wife, the Torah commands you to trim her hair and cut her nails? That's a mitzvah, one of the 613. Or that if you impale a criminal on a stake, you can't let the body remain overnight, but must bury them the same day. And in one particularly noteworthy, for those of us with teenage or young adult children, the Torah commands that parents shall not be put to death for their children's crimes, and to be fair to them, nor shall children be put to death for their parents' crimes. These are just a few seemingly irrelevant mitzvot in a parsha chock full of them. I say seemingly irrelevant because we must ask ourselves whether they are truly irrelevant or whether there are lessons that we can learn from them even today. Are there things that we can apply to our lives now? After all, one of the basic tenets of Reform Judaism is that Torah should be viewed as living and breathing and not stuck in the time in which it was written or given to us by God on Mount Sinai, whatever you believe. I've had my own personal journey that this parsha really made me think about. I grew up in a very conservative, more like conservadox home, and went to an Orthodox day school through high school, which may not be very believable to most of you here, given my flubbing of the candle lighting bracha. But I think I've just blacked out. I think I blacked out a lot of it from the trauma of the yeshiva. While my parents always encouraged me to be free-thinking and independent, my school did not. We were taught that the Torah was literally gospel, to be accepted without question or critical thought, and that's one of the things that I appreciate the most and why I found a home in Reform Judaism. It's that critical thinking is not just acceptable, but encouraged, and this parsha does require some real thought. For example, how do we reconcile rules about how to treat an enslaved woman in the modern era? How can we look at something so repugnant to our morals today as reflecting well on our religion? With difficulty, I suppose, but it works. Think about it. At the time the Torah was written, good catch, thank you, mass murder and or enslavement of vanquished enemies was de rigueur. And we cannot escape that our ancestors were a product of their time and context, and hence not totally different than the other nations. But we were, and I'd like to think remain, at least somewhat different and more just and humane than others. Because unlike other nations, we were commanded to treat people humanely, even vanquished enemies, because in addition to cutting the hair and nails of women's captives, the Israelites were commanded to leave them alone for a month so that they could mourn their parents, and only then could they be taken as wives. And remember, the Torah does at times make a distinction between purely sexual situations and marriage. And while these women were brought into these households against their will, which is obviously just morally repugnant and awful, the Torah makes clear that these women were to be wives. And that obviously did not bestow the same rights as it does today, but it did at least afford them some degree of rights and protection. So as awful as the concept of slavery is, I think we could take a modicum of comfort that even in that era, our ancestors were commanded to remain humane, or at least humane relative to the time and context of the Torah. And what about burying that poor schmo who you just impaled on a stake? How do we reconcile that to the modern era? I suggest there are two ways. One is the humanity that I just discussed. That impaled person probably had a family or friends who cared for and loved them. Immediately burying them alleviated the friends and family's pain and their possible humiliation. And as we've seen time and again in the Torah, many mitzvot are directly related to health and hygiene without ever explicitly saying so. And since we know that rotting bodies can lead to disease, immediate burial takes care of that problem. So yeah, death by impaling, not exactly a good thing, but again, the Torah and our people were products of their times. And again, at least in that context, the mitzvot can be understood as humane and beneficial to society. Just like we hopefully evolve for the better over the course of our lifetimes, we need to view our religion the same way. Again, living and breathing and ever evolving for the better, or hopefully the better. The last example I gave was children and parents not being put to death for each other's crimes. Here's one, finally, that I think is somewhat timeless. Judaism has always put a premium on justice: criminal justice, moral justice, and social justice. And we've always been a people of the law. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only lawyer here tonight, in fact. And I included this example as a reminder that while it is true that some of our views on some mitzvot require some deep thought, and that we need to remember that time and context are really important when interpreting our several thousand-year-old Torah, some concepts of Judaism are timeless and require no interpretation or re-examination. And while our kids may want to blame us for anything that goes wrong in our lives, it's nice to know that the Torah does not. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.